Damn, look at Amy. Next level.
Hey, what? I don't even know.
She's got apparatus.
Look at that apparatus.
Yeah.
She has big goals now, so this is.
Let's go.
That's what that camera's for. All right, so you sent me a bunch of messages this week.
I did.
And I was torn on what we should talk about today.
Oh man, I was flying messages.
You have so many good ones, and I'm gonna save a couple of them.
What?
Yeah, because I realized that there's one that you sent me last week that should have been a staple of Seeking Wisdom since day one, and we haven't done a podcast episode on it yet.
All right, let's do it. I don't know what it is.
Okay, so I'm going to read you a little quote. This was from an announcement that went out last week, and it was talking about you guys, you and Elias. One indelible lesson from David and Elias is the philosophy of servant leadership. Servant leadership focuses managers on serving their team, not the other way around. And sometimes that means helping solidify a vision, but more often it means empowering people and teams with an uncomfortable level of ownership. So today on Seeking Wisdom, we're going to talk about servant leadership.
Wow, I can't believe we haven't talked about this.
I can't believe it.
But before we go into this, I got an email.
This is where I never know where this is going to go.
I got an email from a listener up in Canada. Got called out.
Yeah.
We need to eat some humble pie and say, we apologize, Seeking Wisdom family, because we let you down. We let the ego get in our way with not the last episode, which was Pat Grady, the one before that, which we talked about. It was supposed to be a thank you episode.
It was supposed to be a thank you episode, and I think...
Explain yourself. Explain yourself to the people.
I'm going to explain myself. I'm taking ownership. It's supposed to be a thank you episode. We had a week of hypergrowth, and we announced our Series B. It was supposed to be a thank you episode. But I guess it came off as a little bit humble braggy, and that's not what we ever want to do.
No. So we apologize to you, everyone, peoples.
We apologize. We got one email, and I don't know if that's indicative of the larger thing. But if somebody tells you, then
that's it. And we got to remember the struggle between humility and your ego is a daily battle. We all falter.
Yes.
And so we faltered a bit. We apologize. We're back at it. We're back on the grind. We're here to talk about servant leadership.
Yeah.
What do you know about servant leadership?
What do I know about servant leadership? I didn't know. I always knew what it was, but I didn't know the name. I didn't know it had a name.
Yes.
And to me, servant leadership has been like leading by example. That's always been a thing that I've tried to think about is leading by example. Those are people that I respect. And those are people that do things. But then once I've been here 2 years now, and when I got connected with you guys, I started to see the true meaning of servant leadership, which is everything from cleaning up like after somebody to buying donuts to I don't know whatever the small examples are. Servant leadership is basically a way to set the tone for everybody else. Yep. And if you want to lead, first you have to serve.
I love that. If you want to lead, first you have to serve. So I kind of stumbled upon the idea of servant leadership many years ago. Probably, I don't remember what year it was. Early 2000s, let's say, when I read for the first time one of my favorite books, Sam Walton, Made in America.
That's 3 times in 24 hours you've mentioned that book.
People don't know.
How much does it cost?
$5.
Oh.
Okay.
But it's too expensive.
Okay. He was the richest man in the world. He wrote that book on his deathbed.
The richest man in the world wrote a book, and it cost $5.
But everyone wants to learn, but no one has time to read that book.
You could go keep reading BuzzFeed anyway.
Okay, yeah, or BuzzFeed. Anyway, in that book, the first time I read it, he talked about the notion of servant leadership, and that he was there to serve the associates at Walmart, right, which was his company, and that's how he viewed things, right? He had this kind of humble approach where humble beyond any of us, right? Was a billionaire, drove an old pickup truck with dogs and chickens in the back, and was there, sweeping up and taking care of those stores, and that was his approach. And there was something that spoke to me about that, but I put it to the side. I did what all of us do, followed conventional wisdom, went the opposite of servant leadership, and did that for a number of years. And then it was years later that I came back to revisit that topic.
I love you just said conventional wisdom, and I was listening to the podcast we did with Pat Grady, because I do listen to every Seeking Wisdom episode.
He had a great quote in there.
Reps and sets. 3 minutes in, he said, if you follow conventional wisdom, you'll end up with a conventional company. And I was like, wow.
And that's true in all areas of life. If you follow conventional wisdom in finances, you'll be broke. If you follow conventional wisdom in health, you'll be sick. And if you follow it in building companies, you'll build a mediocre company. So I followed conventional wisdom, led to mediocre results. Then I came back to read, and I didn't like the results, and so I thought there had to be a different way. And somehow I think I reread that book, and that really stood out to me. The idea.
What's the connection between servant leadership and ownership?
So, good question. So before I answer that, let me explain how I think about servant leadership. So typically in kind of management theory, there's this pyramid, right? And at the base of the pyramid, so think about a pyramid, at the base, which is the largest part, obviously, of a pyramid, those are the individual contributors. And then as you go up in title, you start to go up to, then you go to managers, directors, VPs, CEO, right? And that's the top of the pyramid, right? And what happens in most companies is that's how they're run. And most people want to move from the bottom of the pyramid, the mass of many, and they want to go up and be as close to the top of that pyramid. And why is that? Because the rewards and the decision-making happens that way. And then servant leadership takes that paradigm, and my version of it flips the pyramid upside down. And so at the top of the pyramid is the widest part, right? And at the top of the pyramid, in my version, are the customers, are the first thing, right? So they are the most important thing. And then in the second tier are the individual contributors, and then you keep going down until eventually you get to the CEO, right? And what that does is it gives everyone a visual paradigm for understanding who is here to serve who. And the idea is that the higher your title is, the more your job is to support those above you. And ultimately, the person that is at the very top are the customers.
Okay. How do you, so you're a CEO, you've been on exec teams. How do you screen, how do you interview for that? Like, how do you screen for that? And how do you make sure that everybody else is a believer? Because I feel like that doesn't work if you're the only guy that thinks about that. Like, it has to be a company culture thing, right?
I think that's a good question. I think it doesn't work unless you have these little tiny acts that are unscalable, back to our unscalable kind of notion, like that are not scalable, that you have to do each day. Because by its very nature, like the things that you're going to deal with in this upside down pyramid are to deal with these exceptions that are not scalable, right? It's going to be the complaints about, like we talked about, the no M&Ms, or like we haven't had donuts in 3 weeks, or whatever it is. Like those have to become the top priority, or whatever the customer may be complaining about. And so one, we orient our teams around serving the customer. But beyond that, that's the first guardrail. Beyond that, we kind of try to look for managers and VPs and those kind of people that are willing to put in the work first, back to your example in the beginning, and serve and actually do the job before they lead.
And one thing, I remember you wrote this early on. You wrote this early on at Drift. You wrote, there's something, I forget what the doc was, but an internal thing on the wiki. And we were talking about, you wrote something like, whether we hire a VP, a C-level, whatever, a director, a senior director, a manager, whoever, nothing that you've done before at other companies counts.
Yeah.
Everyone's clock, everyone's resume resets when you come to Drift. Is that a connection to this?
Absolutely.
You got to come in and show.
You get no credit.
No credit.
Yeah, and one thing that I would do in the past, which we should do again, is even when you would bring in a VP, I would not have anyone report to that person for a while until they proved themselves, right? And so they had to earn their way versus coming in and saying...
You've done that?
Absolutely, 100%.
In product?
Yes, 100%.
So what do they do?
They were an individual contributor, and they helped the team. So
like they're like a PM for a while? Or like...
They basically served. They served the team. They did one-on-ones. They did all that stuff, but no one actually reported to them.
I like that a lot.
And then eventually, as they had some mastery and they would prove themselves, then 2 people would report to them, and then a team, and then a bigger team, and then 3 teams, and it just kept expanding until the point that maybe a whole organization reported to them. But what that showed was, one, it was a qualifier for people who wanted that role. Like, are you willing to go back to zero, back to your point, and earn your way back, even though you have this great experience, even if your title and you came in and your title was VP, it just still meant you had to work your way back up. Are you willing to do that? And that would disqualify most people.
Yeah, most people, because that's the ultimate. Like, everyone the stock line is like, I roll up my sleeves and whatever, right? You've heard that so much from everybody.
No one does it.
No one does it. That's a hell of a way to test
a crazy test.
Yeah.
Others would be, interviewing people and seeing how often they took credit for things versus gave other people credit. That's
the we thing.
So that's an example of like serving. And whether even when someone was in and was in a leadership role, like were they willing to put aside maybe what they were focused on in order to help an individual within the team.
You know, like, the other hard part, and this is hard to learn, ego thing, is that with servant leadership, you often have to do things, actually almost all the time you have to do things where no one is, it's thankless. It's a thankless thing.
Totally thankless.
You're never going to get the credit, right?
Nope.
Nobody's ever going to be like, oh man, thank you so much for bringing in those donuts, man. That was
totally. It's
people
never
are like,
happen.
Fuck you. I expect you to bring that in.
Donuts. How come there were no jellies this time? What's going on? What's happening here?
We don't have any. We're the vegan donuts. We don't have any.
Oh, that's true. That's true. No vegan donuts. No vegetarian donuts. It's true.
That's not a knock on vegans. We're about the plant life. So
that a plant-based lifestyle. Hashtag plant-based.
I'm getting nervous when there's more people that are. Every episode we can't offend somebody.
And we love it. Rich Roll podcast.
Future Seeking Wisdom guest.
That's for sure. You better come on, dude.
Yep.
So anyway, that's a way to test. That's the way you go. And I think what ends up happening is in order to build an organization, a company that has the sense of autonomy that we all want as humans, not only people here at Drift, but just humans want, I don't see any way that can work without a servant leadership framework, right? Because it can't work in that model. And so you have to flip it and have the servant leadership framework as the basis for being able to empower that thing that we all want, which is the autonomy and the mastery.
Yes.
It needs to be built on this base.
All right. So before we wrap this one, that's made me think of another management philosophy that we've never talked about here. I want you to talk about. Why one thing that you argue so strongly against and try to build a company around is...
I never argue.
You don't argue. Is to not have consent. Yeah, it is. No consent. There's no decisions driven by consensus.
Come on.
Right?
I hate it.
But that's the norm for so many. That's the default. Is let's.
But that goes back to conventional wisdom, right? Leads to conventional results. Sure consensus means the same thing. Yeah. It means that we're averaging down to the thing that is the least offensive to people.
So if you get 5 people in a room and you say, "Hey, what do you guys all think about What do you think about my new marketing campaign? Would you guys like this?"
That sucks because 1, none of those people are the customer. 2, they probably don't want to offend you. 3, there'll be different opinions in there. No one's right, ultimately, and so you'll average down to something that everyone agrees upon. So it always leads to a bad place. So that's why we try to have fewer meetings than most, because meetings by definition are a consensus driving activity, and so consensus is going to come out of there. And so beyond informational meetings, like we have the company one-on-one or some of the all hands meetings, those are more informational meetings. But when you're 5 people in a room discussing something, those usually, it's hard to fight Mother Nature and say that we're not going to average down to whatever the consensus opinion is there.
And I think I've seen you do this a lot, where you'll say if somebody comes to you with a sales related thing, you're like, I don't know, ask Armin.
Totally.
I don't know, ask Craig.
Yeah.
Craig's Armin's VP of Sales. Craig, you just say, I don't know. That's not my area anymore. Ask them.
Yep.
And you have to delegate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have to get rid of that. Yeah. So don't forget, something has been happening where I'm not seeing enough 6-star reviews.
You just read my mind. We got to do a contest, I think.
We need a contest?
It's the month. I think so. Why not? I'll let you go ahead. You take it.
There's not enough 6-star reviews coming in.
There's not.
My ego is fragile.
Yes.
We all have egos.
Where did they go?
I don't know. We need some more.
Once a week, you would forward me this lovely email from Podrover that would be like, you have 39 new reviews.
Know, but we need some more reviews.
On my couch shh.
So we need to know, do you like this podcast?
Do you still like this podcast?
Do you still want this podcast?
Is this old news?
What's going on?
Do we need to adapt?
Do we need a new
format?
Yeah, what's going on?
What's the matter?
All right, 5-star reviews, 6 stars if you can, and in them mention Michelle, 1L.
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 Is it 1L? It's 1L.
It is 1L. Come on, it's classy.
Fun fact, Michelle works in customer success at Drift, but she closed a deal today.
Yeah.
Careful, watch out.
Watch out, going into sales, put her on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Anyway, mention Michelle and Amy.
And Amy.
Shout it out. And maybe we will have a contest. Maybe we'll give away some books or some things to the people who leave 5-star only reviews.
Oh.
Shout us out. This is a movement Next year, hypergrowth is going to be 5,000 people.
Wait, no, hold on.
I got excited.
This can't be the first time we have this conversation again.
I wish you could see DJ's face right now.
No, actually,
red.
We were getting a coffee.
Look at it. He's stuttering.
No. We talked about 5. We talked about 5. I just wasn't ready for the public to unveil.
All right.
I like what you did though. You flipped the contest. You flipped the contest on him. You said maybe if you leave a review, you'll get something.
Yeah, you'll get something. Maybe. Okay, so 5, not guaranteed. Life is not guaranteed. 5,000 people next year.
You want to tell them the other half?
The other half? Not yet. Not yet. So 5,000 people. We're not going to get there without these 5-star reviews. So go to the Apple Podcast, open that up, leave some 5-star reviews, so we can bring you the best guests on the podcast, but also at next year's Hypergrowth.
We're not going to share too much more about Hypergrowth, but I will tell you this. We are going to be using Seeking Wisdom strategically over the next year. We're featuring people who are role models, mentors, peer groups, legends to us. We're going to bring them on Seeking Wisdom. We didn't have a lot of guests, and then we realized, you know what? Let's have guests, but let's only have people that really we can learn from, and that's who we're going to have. So what we realized though is that Seeking Wisdom is like the perfect place to build up all these people, and then we ask them to come speak at Hypergrowth.
This is your personal mentor network, role model network here. So leave a review. Shout out Amy Michelle 1L.
Yes.
Tell Michelle that she needs to go into sales. We'll show this to her, and keep listening. If you like this podcast, share it with someone else. Share with a friend. All right, we're out.
See ya.